Hello and welcome to this third part on our hero's journey and looking at the Monomyth breakdown. So we have looked at a few sections already. If you haven't seen those, then make sure you go back and have a look at them first. This is the third video in a series of 5, so that you can make sure that you're on track and that you're not getting the order in the wrong way around. So let's have a little reminder of what we were looking at. Let's just jump to my screen there. So we were looking at Joseph Campbell's breakdown of the hero's journey, or the Monomyth, and looking at the different sections that a hero can take throughout a narrative structure that can be applied in all manner of different ways. We are using Star Wars as an example, just to go through and look at how that works with Star Wars, and we are so far kind of through the first kind of 3 sections of that, which I shall very briefly go over in a second. All right, so on screen is our quote that we've looked at before. So, a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered and a decisive victory is won. Now, we won't get to the decisive victory just yet, but we are going to look at the fabulous forces encountered. So, just as a reminder, this is where we are up to. So we have looked at, in the second video in our series, we looked at the ordinary world, the call to adventure and the refusal. And today we're going to look at mentor help, crossing the threshold and test allies and enemies. So we looked, we're looking at Star Wars, sorry. So we looked at the ordinary world and where our hero starts and how it grounds him and makes it easier to empathise with. We looked at the call to adventure for Luke Skywalker when he found the message on the droids that he was looking after and tidying up, and how that might be the start of his journey as he goes through the whole narrative. And then we looked at the refusal of the call, being unsure of whether that's really for him. Is this kind of his story that he should be taking on? He just being a farm boy that is kind of thinking about harvest before any of this happened, rather than kind of battles or princesses that he might need to rescue. All right, so we're going to look at the next 3 stages within our hero's journey. The first one being meeting the mentor. Now, with Star Wars, we're kind of slightly have a couple of these stages running in tandem. So I said before in the video that Luke found a message on the droids, and it was asking for someone called Obi-Wan Kenobi. He wasn't sure who that was, but he knew of an old Ben that lived kind of nearby, so he took the droids to them. He subsequently finds out that that is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the message is for him. And that's where we were looking at their meeting, the screenshot before, and with the refusal of the call. So he's met the mentor at the same time. So we kind of have a couple of things running in tandem at the moment. But meeting the mentor is crucial. All right, let's have a look. This crucial turning point where the hero desperately needs guidance, he meets a mentor figure who gives him something he needs. Okay, he could be given an object of great importance, insight into the dilemma he faces, wise advice, practical training, or even self-confidence. Whatever the mentor provides the hero with, it serves to dispel his doubts and fears and give him strength and courage to begin his quest. So, when they meet for the first time, there's a few things that happen. One is that Obi-Wan Kenobi, old Ben, gives Luke a bit more of an understanding of what is going on in the galaxy around him, with the Empire, with this oppressive regime that is kind of forcing their will across the galaxy that they're existing in. So he understands and gives him a little bit more insight into that dilemma, as it says before. He also gives him something. He gives him his father's lightsaber. Okay, which is a weapon that is famous throughout Star Wars, and if you're not sure what a lightsaber is, then just Google it rather than me explaining it. Go through. It's basically a big sword with a kind of light going through it. And starts to give him some of that advice and some of that training and confidence, saying that you can do this. I need your help with this, Luke. I can't do it on my own. So where you've got the refusal of the call and meeting the mentor running in tandem, and that could happen quite a lot, because obviously you're going to meet the mentor and they're going to expand on the story to allow the hero, to make that decision of whether or not they can take up that call and go on that journey. So you've got an understanding of where the meeting the mentor, the refusal of the call, comes together. Okay, next stage. Crossing the threshold. So this is where our hero makes their decision. Okay, and I'll come to this screenshot in a second. The hero is now ready to act upon his call to adventure and truly begin his quest, whether it be physical, spiritual, or emotional. So it doesn't necessarily, your narrative doesn't necessarily have to be going physically from one place to another. It might be something far kind of more spiritual and emotional about that. And when you're looking at your own stories and you're looking at your own choose your own adventure narratives that you're putting together, you can make them as kind of emotional and a spiritual or as a physical journey as you like. Okay, it's over to you. Think about what is of interest to you. Think about what you know and what you enjoy and what you'd like to write about. So he may go willingly or he may be pushed, but either way he finally crosses the threshold between the world he is familiar with, his ordinary world, and that which he is not. It may be leaving home for the first time in his life or just doing something he has always been scared to do. However the threshold presents itself, this action signifies the hero's commitment to his journey and whatever it may have in store for him. Now, on screen is Luke's home, essentially burning. It's kind of been attacked and he's on fire, and it's the aftermath of that. And this is where Luke realizes that he can't ignore what is going on around him. The Empire, this oppressive regime, has landed on his planet that he lives on. They've been looking for these droids because they know it has this message on. They've found who sold Luke the droids initially, and that's who he and Ben find, and they've been attacked and they've been shot in different kind of ways, and they realise that it's the Empire that is tracking them. Luke then realises that they would have found out from the sellers who they sold him to, so he races home and he finds his home kind of on fire, destroyed, and he finds that his uncle and aunt that have kind of looked after him have been killed as well. So there you have that real kind of moment in his story, which is that catalyst for him to go, right, there's nothing for me here now. I'll come with you. I'll find this princess. I'll go on the journey. And he's crossed that threshold. Whether he wanted to or not, he's now been forced into that position. Okay, so you've got that moment within Star Wars, and it's for you to think about, where is your moment? How is your moment of where your hero is going to cross that threshold? And like I say, physically, emotionally, spiritually, however that might come about. Okay. And the last one in this section is quite a big one, really, because it looks at a number of things, but they start coming in quite thick and fast. And these go together really well because, like I said before, you'll have some elements running in tandem within the hero's journey, within your narrative, so that you can make sense of it all. So let's have a little look. We've got test, allies and enemies. So now finally out of his comfort zone, the hero is confronted with an ever more difficult series of challenges that test him in a variety of ways. Obstacles are thrown across his path, whether they may be physical hurdles or people bent on thwarting his progress. The hero must overcome each challenge he is presented with on the journey towards his ultimate goal. Now, he may not know his ultimate goal yet. He may not be sure of what that is. The hero needs to find out who can be trusted and who can't. He may earn allies and meet enemies who will, each in their own way, help prepare him for the greater ordeals yet to come. This is the stage where his skills and or powers are tested, and every obstacle that he faces helps us gain deeper insight into his character and ultimately identify with him even more. So now we're going with him. So whereas we were linked with him before in that ordinary world, we could understand where he started. We've now been developing kind of our understanding of the journey as much as our hero has. So now he's kind of thrust into crossing the threshold and going on to that next stage of the journey. We now get a real sense of that we are going with him, that we are kind of a part of this journey as well, and that's where the narrative is pulling you in to the story and hopefully, grasping your interest and making sure that you're going along for the ride as well. So let's have a little look. So within our story, we've got a few things. So the first test that we come up with, so Luke has gone with Obi-Wan and the droids to this port, this place called Mos Eisley, where they can hopefully find a ship and get off the planet and try and go find the princess that was in the message. Okay, the first test that they come up against is that the Empire, represented on screen by the stormtroopers, which are the guys in the helmets, kind of soldiers, if you like, of our story, are looking for the droids. So they are stopping everyone that's coming into the port to see who might have these droids, to see if they might kind of match up with the droids that they are missing. Now this is where the first test comes. They're stopped by the patrol. Are they going to get found out? Are they going to get caught out within the kind of the very first step of their journey? And this is where you start seeing that kind of mysticism and the Force and the understanding of some of the fantasy elements within our story. So Obi-Wan can control the minds of the stormtroopers, of the soldiers, and make sure that they don't stop them. So they kind of don't realise that they are the droids that they're looking for, and they let them go about their business. So they get through that first test, and there are a number of others that kind of stem from here. But that's just the first real one that we see kind of Luke encounter on his story. So that's why I've included that on the screenshot on there. Allies. So in terms of allies and people that they meet, so they need to find this a way off the planet. They need to find a ship that they can try and find out where the princess is, try and find out what she might need in terms of help. So they enlist the help of our characters that are on screen at the moment. You've got Han Solo on the left and you've got Chewbacca on the right, who they meet in a bar. They meet in by kind of way of some informal introduction that these guys are pilots, they have a ship, and they are normally willing to do things for money. So this is where kind of allies come in. They're not necessarily friends, but they are allies. They will go with them on a part of the journey. They will get them from A to B, and hopefully kind of be friendly with it. But they are allies as they go through. So we start meeting kind of more characters within our narrative and within our story, so that our picture and our wider picture is building of who we're interacting with and who our heroes meeting on their way. All right. We've looked a little bit before at these guys. So you've got the Empire and the Stormtroopers as our enemies. So they've already met them in some way, but they weren't aware. The Stormtroopers weren't aware that that they were the people that they were looking for. Okay, so now as they're trying to leave the planet, they're trying to get away. Suddenly that becomes clear that they are the people that they're looking for, and they with Han Solo and Chewbacca, they get onto the ship as they can, but they've got the Stormtroopers chasing them. And that's where Luke realizes that these guys are the enemies. They are after them. They are not going to stop at kind of leaving them be and kind of gloss over the fact they've already killed the people that sold him to droids. They've already killed his uncle and aunt, and now they're after him. So the excitement, if you like, that we're seeing within the story is led by the intrepidation that Luke is kind of experiencing as he goes through his part of the story. So we are, like I was saying before, we are along for the ride as we go through. So you've got tests, allies and enemies, and they will come in different forms and different stages as we go through. All right. So that's where we're up through today. So let's very quickly just shoot back to our graphic. So we've looked at today we've looked at the mentor and the helper, the person that expands on the story, gives a little bit more meaning to the call that was given initially, and normally has an object or has something to give, not necessarily an object, sorry, but has something to give to our hero, whether that's wisdom, whether that is an object. It could be come in different ways. We then see the crossing of the threshold, where we go from being our ordinary world into this new world and taking up that call, however that might come about, whether it's a drastic event that we see in Star Wars of his uncle and aunt being killed, or whether it's something simpler, whether it's something more cerebral than that. And then finally in this part we look at tests, allies and enemies, and how they start to play a part in our hero's journey as they start developing their understanding of the call, they start developing their understanding of what their part is as we go through there. And you can see we're halfway through the journey now. In part 1 with the ordinary world, the call to adventure and the refusal, we can clump it into as the call to adventure. All right, taken from part 2 there. All of that is that initial setup, and then part 2 kind of labelled up there as the supreme ordeal or the initiation, where it's gone from understanding what the call is to then being kind of realizing that they need to take up that call, and that they are initiated into the story, into the wider narrative, and they have to take up that adventure as they go forward. All right, and then we will start looking at part 3 and part 4 in the next few videos. Okay, so just a reminder, remember you should be working on your story. You've got inkwriter.com to work on your own, choose your own adventure story as you go through, and hopefully picking up some elements from these videos on the Monomyth and the hero's journey. Think about how this fits into your story. Who are your allies going to be? Who are your enemies going to be? What are the tests that you're going to put into place within your story? Are there going to be different ones that we can choose and we can go off at different ways? That's down to you. So think about how you develop that story through as you start putting it together. Okay, remembering that the deadline for that is the 22nd of May 2020. Okay, we'll put more details about that as we get a bit closer to it. A few reminders, please. Don't forget that you've got Chris's 3D videos on Blender going up alongside these as well, so you can, if you're able to, download Blender and have a little play around with that. They are kind of some very kind of early practicing into how you might create your first few models in Blender. So if you've never used it before, make sure you have a look at those and make sure you have a play around with that. That's it for me today. So we will look at part 3 in our next video of our hero's journey, and I will see you then.